Hello. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you today. I am incredibly passionate about the core idea behind my upcoming book and the urgent need for a brighter blueprint for advocacy and social change. We are often told that advocacy is about making noise and being loud, but I actually believe that it's more about architecture. I hope that by the time we're finished today, you'll see exactly why a new blueprint is the only way to build a future that lasts. Before I begin, let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Lesa Brackbill, and I am a resident of Hershey, Pennsylvania. Yes, where we make chocolate. I hold a bachelor's degree in political science and a master's in strategic communication, two degrees that I thought would lead to a standard career. But as you'll soon see, life had a much more urgent use for those credentials. Today, I balance three roles that represent three very different facets of advocacy. In my professional role, I am the Director of Advocacy for Patient Advocacy Strategies, where we help biopharma and industry partners have a more patient-centered focus and do things the right way. In my personal life, I am also a board director for Krabbe Connect, which is a nonprofit that supports families affected by Krabbe disease. And in my public role, I am an elected school board director for the Dairy Township School District here in Hershey. These titles represent my work, but more importantly, they represent three different perspectives on how systems fail and how they can be fixed. Whether I am in a legislative hearing, a nonprofit boardroom, or a local school board meeting, I have found that the mechanics of making a difference are the same. I have always been persuasive, just ask my parents, but I never anticipated that the journey of my life would force me to master the art of persuasion. I didn't just become an advocate, I had to become an architect to re-engineer a future for families I hadn't even met yet. Ultimately, I am here because of Tori. In July of 2014, we began what we thought was a typical journey into parenthood. Our daughter was healthy, she was happy, and she was our entire world. But at 5 months old, our story took a turn. She suddenly became symptomatic with what we now know was Krabbe disease. It took a 6-week diagnostic odyssey from the time she became symptomatic until we received the diagnosis. And that time period was a blur of doctors, tests, and mounting fear. When the results finally came back as Krabbe disease, our world didn't just change, it shattered. I realized then that I couldn't just be her mother. I had to learn to navigate a system that wasn't prepared for us. On diagnosis day, we sat in that office expecting a plan. Instead, the neurologist gave us a death sentence. She very gently told us that Tori was dying and that we were powerless to stop it. But then she said the words that changed the trajectory of my life. If you had caught it at birth, you could have treated it. In that moment, I realized that Tori wasn't just a victim of a disease. She was a victim of a broken system. The blueprint for newborn screening in Pennsylvania was missing a vital bridge. Because the system hadn't looked for her condition at birth, she had fallen through a gap that didn't need to exist. It wasn't that a treatment didn't exist. It was that the system hadn't delivered it in time. In the darkness of that first month, the grief was overwhelming. Our days were filled with endless medical appointments and the heavy reality of caring for a dying child. I never wanted to be a nurse, but I quickly became one. But in the middle of the rubble of that grief, we made a choice. We decided that Tori's story would not be defined by a disease, but by the love that we shared. So we made a decisive choice to choose joy. We committed to giving her a lifetime of experiences in whatever time she had left. Looking back, that choice became the foundation for everything that followed. We created a bucket list and we lived a lifetime of memories in just 14 months, which honestly was a little bit exhausting. But this wasn't just about fun. It was about resilience. Completing those 50 adventures gave us the strength to keep standing when everything felt heavy. It taught us that when you can't change the destination, you can change the way you travel the road. After Tori passed away on March 27th, 2016, the choice to choose joy evolved into a choice to take action. and I got to work immediately. My motivation wasn't complicated. I believe that dying is not a word that should ever be used to describe a child. My background in political science and communication was no longer just a degree. It became the engine I used to fight for newborn screening reform in Pennsylvania. I set out to ensure that no other parent would have to hear that their child's life was lost to a pothole in the system. While it feels weird to quote myself, I wrote this in my first book, and it so perfectly describes the mindset of both me and my husband. The depth of my love for my daughter is not measured by the number of tears I have cried, but rather by the life I choose to live in her absence. And in her absence, I choose to advocate with kindness, respect, humility, and a willingness to collaborate with and learn from others who know more than me. My advocacy journey didn't start with a blueprint or a plan. It started with a megaphone. Early on, I thought that being loud and taking a partisan side was the only way to win. I also thought that this would be a quick and easy endeavor. I was very wrong about all of that. Over 5 years with 3 grueling legislative attempts, I had to unlearn everything that I thought I knew about the political process. I had to trade my partisan lens for a nonpartisan strategy. This shift is what allowed me to see the 12 threads of effective advocacy. I didn't just find these principles, I survived my way to them. Ultimately, the system didn't move because I was loud. It moved because I changed. On November 25th, 2020, Act 133 was signed into law. But as any advocate knows, the signature is just the start. This is the part of the story where the work begins to become invisible, which is the ultimate goal. We didn't just pass a bill, we re-engineered a process. We cleared the administrative rubble and paved a new road for every family in Pennsylvania. After a 180-day implementation period, the system went live in May of 2021. To the outside world, it was just another day. But for every newborn in our state, the world had become significantly safer. This was the moment my personal why became a public reality. The system was finally working, serving families who would never even know we were there. I'm not going to take the time to dive into the complexities of newborn screening, but I wanted to give you a glimpse of the problems that we solved, and I was able to solve those because of the 12 threads that I eventually wrote about. But essentially, we made screening equal from hospital to hospital. So it didn't matter which hospital you happened to be born in, you would receive the same care. We made every condition mandatory. We aligned Pennsylvania with the federal recommended uniform screening panel. We changed the way we funded it. Most importantly to me, we gave the advisory board the authority to add conditions themselves, removing the legislature from the entire equation. Pennsylvania now has the strongest newborn screening system in the entire country. We screen for more things. We can add conditions more quickly than anybody else. And because of my relentless advocacy, the advisory board chose to add Krabbe disease, and we became the 9th state to screen for it. So why do we need a brighter blueprint? And you may be wondering, how does this apply to me if I have nothing to do with public policy? We'll get to that. This book is the response to a single question that was asked of me by a friend, a fellow advocate, as she was helping me prepare for a conference presentation. And she, in a more rhetorical sense, just said, well, what makes someone an effective advocate? And I said, I don't know. Let's find out. So first I had to define what I meant by advocacy, and I eventually came to this definition, that it is the art of addressing struggles and refusing to let them go unnoticed. In my experience, I have seen time and time again that some advocates believe that being loud is enough, that taking a fierce partisan stance is the only path to success. But I have come to see that performance isn't progress. Instead of a shouting match, the Brighter Blueprint treats the mission like a tapestry. If even one thread is weak, the entire fabric fails. We don't just need volume from our voices. We need to re-engineer the system. And this requires us to use these 12 threads of effective advocacy while strategically utilizing the unique skills and personalities on our team. Ultimately, each of us, no matter what our role may be in this space and why you're here today, we have to recognize a hard truth. Many of the barriers we face were designed that way. Whether we are talking about Medicaid and payer issues, or the struggle with getting funding to even do the basic science to lead to a treatment, whether it's as parents or patients who are trying to do the best that we can for our children, a lot of these barriers were designed to be this way. But if they were designed to be this way, that means we can change the design. We can take these things that were built to be complex and to almost keep us from making a difference. We can change these. Our job isn't just to react to the system. It is to be the architects that unravel those threads of complexity and weave a future that is strong enough to hold us all. I don't know about your state, but in Pennsylvania, we joke that the state bird is the construction cone. It is a universal grievance here, the state of our roads, and there are potholes everywhere. And a pothole doesn't care about your wealth or your political party. It doesn't care about any of those things. It just ruins your commute. In our country, we are often trained to chase the skyscraper, whatever that may be. That might be wealth or status or fame. But in advocacy, it might look like the high-profile win, the massive bill with the catchy name, the ribbon-cutting ceremony. And I'm not saying those things are bad. Those things are alluring because they're visible and glamorous. And for those of us who enter this space because of grief, it can bring us a little bit of meaning because we feel seen. But what I have learned is that skyscrapers are often complex, and that complexity can be a form of gatekeeping. When a system is made to look like a skyscraper, people feel that they need a specialized degree just to walk into the door. It makes us feel like just a parent, a scientist, or a neighbor being those things isn't enough to tackle the problem. If we want to make the world better, we have to shift our focus. The Brighter Blueprint is about moving beyond monuments to our own advocacy and loss and looking instead at the friction in the system, or the potholes. When we frame these systemic barriers as potholes, it becomes something we all have the responsibility and the ability to fix. Our success shouldn't be measured by the noise that we make, but by how quiet and seamless we make the system for everyone else. While your neighbors might admire a skyscraper from the distance, most of them will never walk through its doors. And if you live in Hershey, we don't have any anyway. But every single one of your friends and neighbors and family members will feel the repetitive frustration of a pothole. I know that an example of a pothole that I experience with my twins who have genetic hearing loss is these needless systems and having to fill out forms every single year, even though the information doesn't change. Those types of administrative rubble, as I've come to call them, and these potholes don't have to be this way. And so that's why I defined them as a pothole, because I figured it was the most relatable metaphor. But these are the things that stop families or people from getting what they need. Skyscrapers are exclusive. Potholes are universal. So this is why I truly believe this is the truer measure of impact. And our goal shouldn't be the glory of the build. It should be the invisibility of the solution. And I know this may sound ironic because I did get a law passed here, but that's not the greatest success. To me, the definition of success is that when babies are born today and their newborn screening has a positive result, those parents do not know my name. They do not see the 5 years of work that it took to clear the rubble to pave that road. They don't know any of that. They simply receive the option to treat their child that we did not. So as I've said before, we win when the system works so well that no one even knows that we were there to fix it. When I first began to unravel the characteristics of an effective advocate, it honestly felt like this tangled ball of yarn in my brain. But slowly I would identify a color and I would pull that out, and I began to separate the pile. And that pile revealed to me that advocacy is not just the work we perform, it is the character we cultivate. I would assume that most of you have at least seen a blueprint before, even if you haven't studied it, but blueprints are two-dimensional. They are flat. They're a drawing of a structure that doesn't exist yet. And for many of us, like me, it is almost impossible for me to look at a blueprint and visualize what it is going to be someday. but a tapestry, something that is woven, everyone can see that and they can feel it. They can use it because it has a purpose, it has color, and it has warmth. And so that's what led to the title of the book and the theme. I realize that so often we start with these black and white checklists and we're like, okay, this is what we need to do. Instead of saying, how can we do this differently? And what does it actually take? So the Brighter Blueprint is ultimately a nonpartisan framework that allows us to solve these puzzles together. It also empowers us to prioritize principle over party, evidence over politics, and human outcomes above all else. Because ultimately, we are all navigating the same complex systems, fighting the same administrative rubble. And so this provides the shared language we need to finish the tapestry. So what are the 12 threads? I'm not going to tell you too much because I am hoping that you would be willing to read or listen to the book. But I start the entire thing with the pink thread, which is resilience. Maintain resilience. And this is something I have experienced as a parent advocate more than I can count. We get burned out because so often we are trying to not only take care of our children or whatever the case may be. We're trying to not only take care of the reality that led us to advocacy to begin with, but we also have other things to take care of, and we burn out. And burnout is not a badge of honor. It's actually a structural failure. And so I talk about the importance of maintaining resilience and how we can build that. The second thread is to practice humility. And honestly, this thread is the foundation of the entire tapestry. And you will see that as the weaving metaphor is described in the book. But basically, when we enter rooms as a learner, and not as someone with a megaphone trying to tell decision makers what to do, it changes the power dynamic. It turns a gatekeeper into a teacher and eventually a partner, among other things. Bridging the divide. This is the silver thread. This is the chapter that talks about the importance of nonpartisanship, and honestly, not just in advocacy, but in life. My journey over the last 10 years has led me to become nonpartisan because I truly believe that advocacy isn't winning a political argument. It's about solving a human problem. And we can only solve the serious and complex issues that we face if we are willing to work together and put party politics aside. Learn and unlearn. So often in advocacy, we are educating and we are just trying to get as much information as we can to these decision makers, whoever that may be, so that they will do what we want them to do. But sometimes we go in and we don't have the data that they want. We just tell our story because that's a lot of what we've been trained to do. Just tell your story and everything will be okay. And in reality, data is what will help move those mountains and remove those barriers. So we need to not just tell them what we feel, but we need to show them what we know. But we also need to be willing to unlearn when we are presented with new information, new facts, new data. It's incredibly important. And again, you can see how this uses humility as well. Listen for the unspoken. This also can be phrased as listen to understand. This has truly been one of the most life-changing threads for me. Because what I learned throughout my process is that when I was told no, it was rarely a wall or a permanent no. But it was a diagnostic result that helped me figure out which turn to take in the road. We learned to listen for the specific technical hurdles the stakeholders are actually protecting. In everything, we need to use integrity, but especially with our communication. We need to make sure that we are not just sharing stories to pull at heartstrings, but we share them to illustrate a gap in the blueprint that data alone can't explain. I actually quote Brene Brown in the book where she says that maybe stories are just data with a soul. That's a paraphrase. But we always need to make sure we are not exaggerating. We are not spinning. We are always speaking the truth and doing it with integrity, because if we don't, our reputation can be ruined. Advocating for equity. This is something that Act 133 did by making it so that it didn't just matter which state you were born in, because that's how it was in Pennsylvania. If you were born in Pennsylvania, the hospital would then determine what you were screened for at birth. And I wanted to make sure that was not the case anymore. So we need to make sure that any problem we are trying to solve creates a solution that works better for everyone, no matter their wealth or their status in society. We need to forge alliances. This has been the surprising part of my advocacy journey in the rare disease space, is how often people work as solo advocates, myself included at the beginning. But I've learned that effective advocacy is a stone soup effort. I don't know if you remember that book from childhood or from reading it to your kids, but everybody has something that they can contribute to the soup, to the pot, to our advocacy efforts. And if we don't see those people on our team, we need to find and bring people in, because being excluded in this space is devastating. And so if we don't like how that feels, we need to make sure that we are bringing other people in. Again, bringing up ethics and integrity, we have to lead ethically, everything that we do, because there is so much mis and disinformation out there today. Accuracy becomes a superpower. But this also means that if we learn that we were wrong and that the data has changed, we go back to those stakeholders and we say, hey, this is the case now. And we don't ever try to hide it, because ultimately, if we put our ego aside, it doesn't matter if we were right. What matters is that we are accurate. Share the credit. So again, going back to forging alliances, we have to make sure that we are putting the desired outcome over our egos. And this is another one that has been a surprising observation for me in the last 10 years. But again, I know that a lot of that is rooted in grief, because we come into this, we want to build a legacy for our children. And it can be easy to just assume that we need the credit, we need the fame for what we do. And in reality, giving credit away builds momentum and sustains the movement. The last two are to act strategically. And this may seem like an obvious one, but what I mean by this is that you don't always need a law to solve a problem. Sometimes you just need to fix a form, and that can be done administratively or regulatorily, or it can be done in a completely different, easier way. So we need to focus on the high impact, low effort wins to build momentum and actually solve these problems. And finally, we have to be willing to master the pivot and be fluid. I use both words, both fluid and flexible, in the book, but I really think that fluid kind of fits the situation when we're talking about rare disease, because so often we just have to be able to go with the flow, and figure out where are these cracks in the broken system that we can fill, and that we can make a path that actually works. As I was thinking about how to market this book, these are the three main, well, there's four, but here's three of the phrases that I used on social media, because this is why I wrote the book. Be the reason the next person doesn't need a megaphone, because the system is working. You aren't crazy for thinking that it should be better. You're just ahead of the curve. Let's build the path together. And this book is definitely for everyone who refuses to accept that this is just how it is. But my favorite one is weave for the families you haven't met yet. In rare disease advocacy, we rarely see the fruits of our labor, and we almost never have the opportunity to meet them. And that's the way that it should be, honestly. We are working to fix a broken system, and one that is very ill-designed at times, so that no one suffers as we have. And so I went into this with the expectation that I would never, ever meet anybody impacted by my work. But last summer, I was given the greatest gift. Just 67 days, yes, 6-7, if you have kids, just 67 days after Act 133 went into effect, identical twin boys were born in Erie. I heard about them about a month later because they had been diagnosed with Krabbe disease through the newborn screening we had spent 5 years fighting for. At the time, I didn't know their names, and I certainly never expected to meet them. But last summer, at a gathering of Krabbe disease families, I finally met Trevor and Brendan. As I sat with their mom and dad and I shared how our stories were intertwined, we all cried. But the moment that caused the tears was when I revealed that the twins were born on my daughter Tori's birthday. Our children shared a birthday, and because of Tori, the twins had a starkly different outcome. That is the brighter blueprint in action. Seeing them felt like redemption to me. And because of newborn screening, their parents bravely opted in for them to participate in a clinical trial, and they became the first two in the world to receive gene therapy for Krabbe disease. They will turn 5 this July, and they are doing so, so well. In any problem that we may face, we often wait for a hero to fix the system because we don't feel like we are capable. But my book, The Brighter Blueprint, proves that we are the ones we've been waiting for. If you want to move beyond the frustration of a broken system and into the clarity of a functioning solution, I invite you to read A Brighter Blueprint. I want us to work together and weave something that doesn't just make a point, but makes a difference. So thank you so much for this opportunity to share this vision. I want to thank my employer, Patient Advocacy Strategies, not only for believing in me and in this message, but for also allowing us to open the Brighter Blueprint Studio, which will open in the fall. And this will be a training ground for these different for these threads and these concepts so that we can teach them in a whole new way. So you can see the website right there, brighterblueprint.patientadvocacystrategies.com. But also, if you are an industry partner and you need help with any of these things or with clinical trial recruitment or readiness, PAS is here for you. So thank you so much.